Greetings, aimless adventure crew, and welcome to another episode of Murph's Vault. In the previous episode, I talked about the Battlestar Galactica toys, specifically the small ships that were created by Mattel, and how they were tied into and connected to the Kenner Star Wars figures, specifically the legendary rocket-firing Boba Fett, and the connection between the two. And then I also described these individual toys. In this episode, I'm going to talk about another connection, which was Mattel's Battlestar Galactica 3 3/4 figure line. Now, Kenner pretty much brought about the 3 3/4 size for action figures. Before the Star Wars line, pretty much the G.I. Joe toy line had set the standard for the size of action figures or dolls that children would play with, which was also connected to Barbie's size as well, which was the 12-inch classic G.I. Joes. That was also repeated with the $6 Million Man line and others. There was also Mego at the time, which were a little bit smaller, but they were still quite a bit larger than the 3 3/4 line. Well, when Star Wars hit, then that created a whole slew of different action figure lines based on various properties that were all roughly about 3 3/4 size. They could be made a lot cheaper. They could be sold at cheaper. They took up less room, easier to collect, so on and so forth. Well, in 1979, with the popularity of Battlestar Galactica, Mattel, who was the licensee for toys for Battlestar Galactica, decided to release their own 3 3/4-inch toy line in competition with the Star Wars line. And the first series consisted of 6 figures. There were 6 figures only, not 12 like in Star Wars and all that, but just 6. And I'll show some of those to you. One of the first one was a pretty unique figure. That's this guy here. His name was the Imperious Leader. You may not recognize him. You know where you might recognize him from? There. Do you recognize him now? This was actually the leader of the Cylon forces. He was in the original movie/pilot TV show for Battlestar Galactica. However, they were not happy with how the face looked in the series, so they decided to do all the shots from behind, so you only saw the back of his head. However, with the release of this action figure, we got to see what he actually looked like. Never did know if it was actually a lizard that led the Cylons, or if it was a robot that looked like a lizard. Anyway, this is what he was. It was just a bare figure, did not come with any accessories. Yes, he is naked under the robes, but anyway, the Imperious Leader, leader of the Cylon forces. Cool figure, had a cloth cape, which was not very common back in 1979, so that was pretty neat. The next figure was actually a staple, one that had to have been made. It was also kind of unique as well, and that figure was the Cylon. Now, the Cylon here, it was chrome. Its arms were articulated, and so was its head, and it had a waist that turned as well. However, the legs were molded in place and could not bend. It came with a gun that could be held in his arms. That was basically it. So basically, you could pose this person standing there holding its gun. Pretty cool figure, once again, at the time. Pretty neat. But, could have been a little better. But anyway, that was the other figure, the Cylon. Now then, another figure of the first 6 that were released was the Ovion. You only saw these guys in the original pilot/movie, whatever you want to call it. They were the aliens on Carolon. They were the ones that were actually luring humans there so they could feed them to their young. They're like these insect-like creatures. They have 4 arms and 2 legs. Kind of neat. All 4 of the arms are articulated. The head does not turn, but the legs are articulated. One thing you're going to want to look out for is the cape. More often than not, this cape is missing. It was made out of a very flimsy material that tore very easily, and most of them tore and got thrown away. So most of the Ovions you see out there are missing their cape unless they're in the packaging. So if you find one with the cape, that's actually pretty cool. So those were the 3 villains they made of the first 6. The other 3 were actually heroes or good guys. The first one, I don't know if it's so much of a hero, but they made Muffet. Muffet the Daggett. Yes, they made a dog figure, or a robotic dog figure. Yeah. Anyway, it has four legs that are articulated. It has a head that can swivel from side to side, and it had a little tail. Once again, the problem with this figure was this tail was very flimsy and could break off very easy. So if you find any that are loose, most of the time the tail is not present, or it is, but it's been broken. Even sometimes in the package you'll find it with the tail broken off, just because the plastics got brittle. But anyway, once again, it's a robot dog. That's about it. I don't know how much play value you would have with that. The other two, one was Commander Adama. We got Commander Adama here with his cape, and he also came with a tiny little gun. These guns were very small and got lost very easily. So to find one with the gun actually is very difficult. Most of them are found like this, or even without their cape. But this was Commander Adama, played by Lauren Green. He actually kind of looks like Lauren Green a little bit there. The arms are articulated, the legs are, and the head is. So once again, you had your leader of the good guy forces to face off against the Imperious leader. Let me put this guy away here. And then the last one of the original six was actually Starbuck. He also came with a gun, just like Adama. Pretty much same design. Um, Almost pretty much the same head sculpt, except for a different paint job for the hair. But yeah, pretty much the same scope altogether. They got a little cheap on these. So just different color plastic. So, but this was supposed to be Starbuck. It doesn't really look like Starbuck, but hey, you know. But yeah, they didn't make an Apollo. But anyway, they'd rather have Muffet instead of Apollo. Thought that was a better play value. Whatever. So those were the first six figures. Battlestar Galactica did not last past one season. Yeah, I'm not even going to count Battlestar Galactica 1980, where they found Earth, because that failed pretty bad, and I know the fans like to acknowledge that. So with only one season of the TV show, and then it was canceled, pretty much the toy line was canceled about the same time as well because of sales. However, they did get four more figures released, and I'll show you those as well. The first of the four, which you would call Series 2, actually started off as a mail away, and it is a gold color Cylon. There was actually an episode where you had a Cylon leader that was gold chrome instead of silver chrome. Therefore, this was a figure that they did not have to retool. It was basically they already had the same molds and they just had to do a different chrome job. So the gold Cylon was a mail away, and then it was eventually sold on the card with the second series of figures that were released. There's two more here that I think were very necessary. As necessary as Apollo, which was not made, I'll tell you right now. But next one was, of course, Baltar, the main enemy, the traitor of the human forces. They made Baltar. He came with the same pistol that Adama and Starbuck came with, but here you actually had the guy who was the main villain throughout the series. After the original pilot miniseries, you really didn't see Imperious Leader anymore. They might have mentioned him. I think there was one episode where you saw him, but otherwise the villain was Baltar. And here we have Baltar in his Cylon uniform, ready to face off against the colonial forces. And of course, you can't have Baltar, by himself just with the Cylons. He needed his little watchdog, Lucifer. This one this one I think I would have thought was cool as a kid. He didn't come with a gun or anything like that. Only the arms have articulation and the head. There's no waist or legs to speak of. He just basically just stands there, just like the character did in the show. I don't know. I think he's pretty cool, and not much action value, but hey, you gotta have a fun. I think it's kind of neat that during the 1980s, when you had the whole devil worshiping scare with Dungeons and Dragons and the backmasking of records and all that, that they would actually release a children's toy named Lucifer. So, yeah, just something I find interesting. The very last figure of Battlestar Galactica 3 3/4 line was actually, I think, the worst figure of them all. Even worse than Imperious Leader or Muffet, the robotic Daggett. And that is the Bore. Um, I have no idea who the heck chose this to be one of the figures. He came with a club. Yeah, a club. Little plastic thing, supposed to be a wooden club. So that the characters, so we can fight against the characters that have blasters, of course. Yeah, because that's an even fight. Yeah. So that's him. Pretty ugly. He has a pimple for a head. Yeah. His arms are articulated, his head is, and his waist is, but the legs don't bend. Why would they add a weight? I don't know. Anyway, they got cheap. So anyway, this figure, yeah, pretty much he sucks. On a scale of 1 to 10, he is a 1. I would rather play with Ewok figures than this guy. But anyway, if you want to complete your set, you got to find this guy. Once again, you can find him. His club is often missing, though, which can make it very hard to find a complete one unless it's in the package, which, of course, then the price goes up astronomically. But anyway, the Bore. Yeah. Anyway, so those were the Battlestar Galactica 3 3/4 line. Once again, unfortunately, the show did not last past one season. Otherwise, I think we could have had a lot more figures. I would have loved to have seen an Apollo to go with my Starbuck. I would have liked to have seen a Boomer and a Colonel Ty. I think those would have been necessary. With the Cylon forces, I would have liked to have seen a Spectre to go with them. Other than that, there weren't really too many other Cylons out there. You had the Cylon, Spectre, Lucifer, and Gold Cylon, and Baltar Imperius Leader. Yeah, that's about it. But anyway, I would have liked to have seen more of the Colonials made as well. So, but anyway, maybe Count Iblis. That would have been cool. The devil himself. Anyway, thank you for joining me in Murph's Vault. Join me next week when I will have another item from my vault that I will be showing you. Thank you very much. Now I return you to your aimless adventure. Later.